Late October had settled in when my friends and I set off for a much-needed weekend escape. We had rented a secluded cabin in the mountains, a cozy retreat promising crisp air, warm fireplaces, and total relaxation. There were 5 of us: me, my best friend Claire, her boyfriend Sam, and 2 other friends, Jess and Mike. By Friday morning, we hit the road, opting for a scenic route through winding roads and quiet little towns. Around noon, we stumbled upon a tiny hillside town. Its main street was sparse, hosting just a few shops, a gas station, and a small diner named Mabel's Eat. The place looked like a picture-perfect postcard, quaint yet tinged with that eerie stillness some small towns carry. We parked and headed into the diner, a bell jingling overhead as the door swung shut. Inside, it was nearly empty, save for an elderly couple in a corner booth and a man sitting alone at the counter. We slid into a booth by the window, flipping through menus and chatting animatedly, glad to stretch our legs. That's when I noticed him, the man at the counter. He appeared to be in his late 40s or early 50s, sporting a scruffy beard and a worn flannel jacket. He wasn't eating, just nursing a coffee, his eyes fixed on us. It wasn't a casual glance. His gaze was piercing and unwavering. At first, I thought we might have disturbed his peace, laughing as we came in. But his intense stare didn't falter, even when the waitress approached to take our orders. Claire noticed too, nudging me under the table with a subtle "What's up with him?" "Look, think he's upset with us?" she whispered. We shook our heads, baffled. Sam, always the joker, raised his coffee mug in a mock toast toward the man. "Cheers, buddy," he said with a grin. The man didn't respond, didn't even blink. Unsettled, we hurried through our meal and left the diner, nervously laughing it off. "Small towns," Jess said. "Maybe they're just protective of their own." By late afternoon, we arrived at the cabin, tucked deep in the woods. It was perfect, just like the photos. The porch overlooked a sprawling yard, surrounded by trees ablaze with fall colors. We spent the evening unpacking, lighting the fireplace, and soaking in the quiet. For the first time in ages, I felt like I could breathe. Things only began to shift after dinner. We gathered around the fire pit in the yard, roasting marshmallows and swapping ghost stories. That's when Mike's mood abruptly changed. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice hushed. "See what?" Claire asked, following his gaze toward the tree line. "I thought I saw someone. By that big tree over there." We turned to look. At first, I saw nothing. Then a shadow moved, subtle, almost imperceptible, but there. My stomach tightened. "Probably just an animal," Jess said, trying to keep the mood light. But I wasn't convinced. The shape had been tall, almost human-like. And then, unbidden, the image of the man at the diner crept into my mind. We decided to head inside, locking the doors and drawing the curtains. Sam and Mike joked about Bigfoot, but none of us could entirely shake the unease. Before bed, we checked every lock again, telling ourselves it was nothing more than nerve. I woke abruptly around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the porch. At first, I assumed it was one of my friends, but then came the distinct creak of the wooden boards, followed by a soft tapping at the living room window. My heart pounded. Grabbing my phone, I texted Claire, "Are you awake?" Her reply came instantly, "Yeah." "Did you hear that?" I slipped into Claire's room, and together, we peered through a gap in the curtain. The dim porch light barely illuminated the yard, but it was enough to reveal him, the man from the diner, standing at the edge of the porch, staring. We quietly woke the others, huddling in the hallway to discuss what to do. Mike suggested confronting him, but Jess and I immediately shut the idea down. If he'd followed us here, what else was he capable of? We called the police. The dispatcher assured us an officer was on the way, but the remote location meant a wait of at least 30 minutes. Outside, the man hadn't budged, his silhouette unnervingly still. Then he moved, stepping slowly into the light. Sam's patience snapped. "We can't just sit here," he said, grabbing a flashlight. Mike joined him, determined. "Stay inside," he told us. "Lock the door after us." Against my better judgment, I let them go. We watched from the window as they approached the man. "Hey!" Mike called out. What are you doing here? The man turned his head slowly, his posture rigid. Just passing through, he muttered. Why are you creeping around private property? Sam demanded, his flashlight aimed squarely at the man's face. The man's lips curled into a faint smile. Didn't realize it was private, he replied, though his darting eyes suggested otherwise. You need to leave, Mike said, his grip tightening on the flashlight. The man raised his hand slightly, taking a step back. For a moment it seemed he'd comply. Then his smile widened and he glanced toward the tree line. Jess gasped. Another shadow shifted in the woods, a second man barely visible. Mike and Sam tensed. We're not looking for trouble, Sam said, his voice strained. Neither are we, the first man said, his tone chilling. Without warning, he lunged. Mike swung the flashlight, striking him on the shoulder. The man staggered, and the second figure bolted from the woods, charging at Sam. Sam reacted just in time, hitting him square in the chest. Get back inside! Mike shouted. We flung the door open, letting them in before locking it and bracing it with a chair. The men outside pounded on the door, their voices low and menacing. Something heavy smashed against the wood, and the windows rattled as they tried to force them open. The cops are coming, Sam shouted, brandishing the flashlight. Then, abruptly, the noise stopped. Footsteps retreated into the night. When the police finally arrived, the men were gone. The officers found no trace of them, only vague assurances that they'd patrol the area. We left the next morning, cutting the trip short. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that they weren't just passing through. My boyfriend Eric and I had been looking forward to our weekend getaway for weeks. Both of us desperately needed a break, and the idea of escaping to a serene cabin tucked away from the chaos of daily life sounded perfect. We picked a cozy rental described as private and romantic on one of those vacation sites. The photos were stunning: a large stone fireplace, a wraparound porch, and even a hot tub overlooking the woods. We arrived late Friday evening just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The cabin looked exactly as advertised, maybe even better. It exuded a rustic charm, with exposed wooden beams and oversized windows that let in plenty of natural light. On the kitchen counter, we found a handwritten note from the host, welcoming us and wishing us a pleasant stay. After unpacking, Eric poured us glasses of wine, and we settled onto the couch in the living room. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, and for the first time in ages, I felt at ease. We laughed, chatted, and made plans for the hike we'd take the next day. It was all so perfect, until I noticed something. A tiny red light blinked in the upper corner of the room. Eric, what's that? I asked, pointing to the corner. He squinted up at it. Probably the smoke detector, he said dismissively. Yeah, but why is it blinking? I pressed. Most smoke detectors had steady indicator lights, didn't they? Eric shrugged it off, saying it was probably nothing, and I tried to let it go. After all, this trip wasn't about stressing over small details. The next day was idyllic. We hiked through the woods, explored a babbling creek, and took way too many photos. By the time we returned to the cabin, we were both starving and exhausted. Eric grilled steaks on the porch, while I prepared a salad inside. It felt amazing to be disconnected from the world. No emails, no notifications, just us. After dinner, we soaked in the hot tub under a blanket of stars. Everything felt safe and tranquil, as though the cabin was a cocoon shielding us from reality. But later that night, while I was showering before bed, something stopped me in my tracks. Behind the bathroom vent, high on the wall, I spotted another blinking light. This one was blue. My heart sank. I stood frozen, staring at the faint glow, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But I knew better. Wrapping a towel around myself, I called out, Eric, come here. What's up? He asked, stepping into the bathroom. Look, I said, pointing at the vent. Do you see that? He leaned closer, squinting. What the hell? He muttered. That's weird. Pulling out his phone, He turned on the flashlight and climbed onto the edge of the tub to inspect it. After a moment, he said, "There's something back there. It's not just a light, I think it's a camera." My stomach churned. A camera? In the bathroom? My mind raced through every moment we'd spent in the cabin. The private ones, the unguarded ones. Eric tried to remove the vent cover, but it wouldn't budge without tools. "Let's check the rest of the cabin," he said. Armed with a flashlight, we scoured the living room, bedroom, and kitchen. In the bedroom, Eric spotted another blinking light, this time concealed behind what looked like a clock on the dresser. It wasn't a clock at all, it was some kind of device designed to look like one. By now I was shaking. "We need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. Eric agreed, but before we started packing, he insisted on inspecting the smoke detector in the living room. Sure enough, it wasn't a smoke detector at all. Beneath the plastic casing was another camera, its lens barely visible behind the translucent cover. That was the breaking point. Any sense of safety was obliterated. We scrambled to pack, throwing our belongings into bags without caring about order or neatness. Every second in that cabin felt like an intrusion, as if unseen eyes were watching our every move. The thought of what those cameras might have captured made my skin crawl. The camera in the bathroom had recorded me showering. The one in the bedroom had been there while we dressed, and during other intimate moments. Who was watching? What did they plan to do with the footage? Would it end up online, shared in places I didn't want to imagine? Eric called the rental site's emergency line as we sped away down the forest road. He explained what we'd found and demanded immediate action. Their response was infuriatingly detached, like they were dealing with a minor issue instead of a serious violation of privacy. When we got home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those blinking lights. I felt sick thinking about someone watching me in my most vulnerable moment. A week later, the police called with an update. The property owner had been arrested. Investigators found a network of hidden cameras throughout the cabin, all connected to a central recording system. Worse, this wasn't his first offense. He had been running this operation for years, collecting footage of unsuspecting guests. The damage, though, was already done. The thought of our footage being out there, beyond our control, was unbearable. Even now, months later, I can't stay anywhere without meticulously inspecting every room. I check vents, unplug clocks, and shine flashlights into corners. Eric calls it paranoia, but he doesn't stop me. That weekend was supposed to be a peaceful escape. Instead, it became a horrifying lesson about how fragile privacy truly is. And the worst part? Knowing that the footage from those cameras might still be out there, lingering in the shadows, far beyond our reach. I've always been a pretty cautious guy, especially in my line of work. Being an electrician, I've had my fair share of oddball clients and sketchy encounters, so I like to think I can spot trouble before it gets to me. Or so I thought. When my girlfriend, Natalie, and I decided to book a weekend retreat at a cabin, I didn't think twice about it. She'd found the listing on a rental site we'd used a few times before, and everything looked above board. The photos were gorgeous. A snug two-bedroom cabin nestled in the woods, complete with a fire pit and a breathtaking lake view. It seemed like just what we needed after months of non-stop work. I even surprised Natalie by taking Friday off so we could head out early and really make the most of the trip. The drive was peaceful, long stretches of open highway, good music, and a stop at a roadside diner for some unexpectedly amazing pie. Everything felt like it was falling into place. When we arrived, the cabin looked exactly like it did in the pictures, maybe even better. It had that cozy, rustic vibe, a little porch swing out front, a stack of firewood off to the side, and the faint scent of cedarwood in the air. I grabbed the key from the lockbox, and it worked like a charm. Inside, the place was warm and inviting, with comfy furniture, a well-stocked kitchen, and a massive stone fireplace. The first couple of hours were perfect. We wandered around the property, snapping photos of the scenery, and breathing in the fresh air. By the time evening came, we were feeling fully at home. Natalie started preparing dinner while I went out to chop some firewood for the night. That's when I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up and saw an SUV pulling into the driveway. For a moment I assumed it was the property owner dropping by, though I thought it odd since they hadn't mentioned stopping by. The vehicle came to a halt and a man got out. He was stout, with an air of authority that immediately put me on edge. In the SUV, I could see a woman and 2 kids, all sitting tensely. The man strode toward me with purpose. "Can I help you?" I called, setting the axe down. "This is my property," he snapped, his voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" I stared at him, confused. We rented it for the weekend," I said, fumbling to pull up the confirmation email on my phone. "I've got proof if you want to see it." His face darkened. "You rented it from who?" "Through a site called Getaway Rentals," I explained, holding up my phone to show him. Natalie had stepped outside by now, her face showing just as much confusion as mine. The man's expression turned suspicious. "You have a key?" "Yeah," I replied, showing it to him. It was in the lockbox, just like the instructions said. There was a tense silence before his voice turned icy. "Get out of my house. Now." Before I could say another word, he reached into his car and pulled out a gun. Natalie gasped, and I instinctively stepped between her and the man, raising my hands. "Whoa, whoa. There's no need for that," I said quickly, trying to stay calm. "You break into my house and think I'll just let it go," he snapped. "You've got 5 minutes to pack up and get out, or I'm calling the cops." My mind raced as Natalie and I scrambled to pack. None of it made sense. The key worked. The address matched. How could this be happening? We threw our belongings into our bags as quickly as we could, the man standing guard with his gun while his family watched from the car. As we drove away, Natalie called the rental site's customer service line, desperate for answers. The truth hit us like a ton of bricks. The host we'd rented from wasn't the real owner. He'd created a fake listing using old photos of the property, likely taken from a real estate website. The key in the lockbox was a duplicate, and after we booked, the listing had been deleted. We'd been scammed. We drove into the nearest town, both of us rattled and unsure of what to do next. I filed a police report, though I didn't hold out much hope that anything would come of it. The officers were sympathetic but explained that these scams were becoming more common with vacation rentals. We ended up spending the night at a cheap motel, but neither of us got much sleep. I couldn't stop replaying the moment the man pulled out his gun or thinking about how much worse it could have gone. In the following days, we reported the scam to the rental site and were eventually refunded. But the experience left a bitter taste in my mouth. I kept wondering about the scammer. Did he know we'd end up confronting the real owners? Was he watching from somewhere, waiting to see how things played out? The thought made my skin crawl. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't dig deeper into the listing before trusting it. It had seemed so perfect, and the process had been so easy, but that's exactly what these scammers count on. They prey on people who just want a simple, stress-free deal. Now I'm meticulous about booking rentals. I cross-check every detail, research the property, and verify its legitimacy before making a commitment. It might take more time, but after what happened, I'd rather be cautious than risk another nightmare like that. A weekend getaway is supposed to be about relaxation, not dodging bullets. Literally. Sometimes you just need to escape from everything. That's what I kept telling myself when I decided to book a cabin retreat. My job had been draining, and the idea of a quiet weekend surrounded by nature felt like the perfect remedy. I wasn't looking for anything extravagant, just a spot to unwind. A friend had recommended a cozy rental near a lake a couple of hours away, and I immediately jumped at the suggestion. The cabin matched the description perfectly. Rustic yet well-kept, with a modest kitchen and a snug living room. The air carried that distinct scent of aged wood, the kind that brings back memories of summer camps and antique furniture. The real selling point was the stillness. No traffic noise, no people, just the gentle rustling of the forest around me. I quickly set up my laptop to stream some movies later, brewed a cup of coffee, and sank into the couch. This was exactly the escape I needed. The first noise came later that night. It was faint, just a creak above me, like old wood adjusting to the cold night air. I paused my movie, looking up with a flicker of unease, but dismissed it as nothing. Cabins like this were bound to make some noises, right? Probably the wind or maybe a small animal outside. Satisfied with my reasoning, I hit play and continued watching. But as the hours crept by, the sounds became harder to ignore. It wasn't just random creaks anymore. It sounded deliberate, like soft footsteps overhead. I muted the movie and strained to listen. There it was again, a faint shuffle followed by another creak. My mind raced for an explanation. Maybe it was a raccoon? But raccoons don't move like that. Grabbing a flashlight, I made a round of the cabin, checking all the doors and windows. Everything was locked up tight, and there was no sign of anything unusual outside. I convinced myself I was overthinking it and crawled into bed, though it took ages for me to fall asleep. The next morning, the unsettling noises were mostly forgotten. Sunlight poured through the windows, and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee filled the air as I prepared breakfast. I spent the day wandering the nearby trails, snapping photos, and losing myself in a book on the porch. It felt like the escape I'd hoped for. That evening, as I was tidying up, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. In the hallway ceiling, there was a small square panel. It blended in seamlessly with the wooden planks, but now that I'd seen it, I couldn't stop staring. It was an attic hatch. Curiosity got the better of me. Dragging a chair beneath it, I pushed the panel open with my flashlight. It slid aside with ease, revealing a dark void above. A metal ladder was folded neatly into the space, and I hesitated before pulling it down. I wasn't sure what I expected to find: dusty boxes, maybe some forgotten furniture. What I actually found made my stomach drop. Blankets were bunched up in one corner. Beside them sat a water bottle and a flashlight. Someone had been living up here. Recently. I climbed back down, my thoughts racing. Who had been up there? Was it a drifter? A squatter? The cabin had shown no signs of forced entry, so how had they gotten in? More importantly, were they still here? I hesitantly peeked into the attic again with the flashlight, but it was empty. The silence felt heavier now. Maybe whoever had been there had already left. Or maybe the cabin's caretaker had used the space and forgotten to mention it. Still, the unease lingered. That night, I triple-checked all the locks and made sure the attic panel was firmly shut. I woke around 2 a.m. to a sound that froze me in place, something heavy shifting above me. My heart pounded as I listened. This wasn't just the creaking of an old cabin. It was movement. Slow, deliberate. Someone was up there. Then I heard the attic door creak open. My chest tightened as I grabbed my phone and flashlight, stepping into the hallway with trembling hands. The panel was slightly ajar, and the ladder had been unfolded just enough to see someone had opened it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Who's there?" No answer. Just suffocating silence. I backed into the bedroom and locked the door, dialing the cabin owner with shaky fingers. Whispering into the phone, I explained what was happening. She sounded genuinely alarmed. "No one should be there," she said firmly. "Call the police immediately. I'll head over as fast as I can." I didn't wait. With my flashlight in one hand and car keys in the other, I quietly gathered my essentials. The sound of footsteps above me grew louder, moving toward the far end of the cabin. I didn't stick around to see who it was. Bolting to my car, I locked the doors as soon as I slid into the driver's seat. As I backed out of the driveway, the headlights illuminated the attic window. That's when I saw it. Someone was staring down at me. I sped off and didn't stop until I reached a well-lit gas station. I parked beneath the fluorescent lights and waited for the police to call back. When they arrived at the cabin, they found the attic empty. The makeshift setup was gone, as if the intruder had vanished the moment I left. The owner was apologetic and horrified. She mentioned that vagrants occasionally broke into remote rentals, but nothing like this had ever been reported. The police promised to keep an eye on the property, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back. I still don't know who that person was or why they were there. All I know is I came far too close to finding out. Now, whenever I book a getaway, I inspect every inch of the place before settling in. And I never ignore strange noises again. If these weekend getaway nightmares had you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life chills. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Share this video with your travel-loving friends as a reminder to always stay vigilant during their adventures. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.